So the Christmas break is done. The World Juniors are underway, and the Montreal Canadiens are back in action tomorrow night, set to play a couple of games in Florida, starting with tomorrow night's matchup versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. Always a tough test for Montreal, but there may be some light at the end of the tunnel. Let's talk some puck. Hey gang, Kosta here from PuckTalk Montreal for this December 27th edition of the show where we preview tomorrow night's game between the Montreal Canadiens and the Tampa Bay Lightning in Tampa. But before we get to previewing that game, there's a little bit of housekeeping we need to get to. Number one, Sam Montembeault being recalled by the Montreal Canadiens from Laval to rejoin the team in Florida. That doesn't necessarily mean that Sam's going to play. But given the work that he's done with Marco Marciano over the Christmas break, he's expected to be playing a little bit better hockey. Whether or not that's actually true, it's uncertain. His first outing versus Cleveland was not great. His second outing, much better, allowing just one goal. But is that going to translate to the National Hockey League level? We don't know. We'll see what happens. But as we're talking about the Olympics coming up and another break for 2 weeks for the Montreal Canadiens, so they have a very compressed schedule for January and the first 2 weeks of February, we need to take a look at the World Junior Hockey Championship and some of the prospects that are in place at the World Juniors. Starting with, of course, the Montreal Canadiens' top prospect in the tournament, and that is Michael Hage. He's not disappointing. Michael Hage right now with 2 goals and 2 assists for 4 points, leading the tournament in scoring, along with Gavin McKenna, who's got 4 assists. So Hage living up to all the hype. Here's the one caveat, though. He's been absolutely putrid in the face-off dot, and that's something that Dale Hunter and the Canadian coaching staff weren't expecting from him. They thought he'd be much better, but right now, after the games between Latvia and the Czech Republic the other night, there are some questions about his ability to take face-offs, and that's not conducive to him being the second-line center of the future for the Montreal Canadiens. Offensively, no doubt he can cut the mustard. But when you have a centerman, you need to make sure that he's good at the face-off dot. And Hage is going to have to put in a lot of work because right now he has been owned by every team in this tournament, and it's not pretty. So that's the one hole in his game. But otherwise, he's created scoring chances, scored some big goals, including the overtime winner today versus Latvia. And he's been all over the ice out there along with Gavin McKenna and I forget who his other line mate is. It escapes me right now. But either way, he's playing on the second line, and that line has been dominant for Canada thus far in this tournament. Then, of course, there is Carlos Handel, who's playing defense for Germany. Now, he's got just a single assist, but that's not his job out there. He's a steady, rock-solid defensive defenseman for Germany, and Germany has played 2 games and have been extremely competitive in both. They don't have a win, but they have played very well versus their competition, and moving forward, they're going to be one of those pesky teams like they've been for the last few years, along with Latvia, along with Switzerland. You remember how Switzerland started out, right? Switzerland with the likes of Rafael Diaz back in the day and Mark Streit, really turning that program around, and now Switzerland is among one of the best hockey nations in the world. So needless to say that Latvia and Germany, in turn, are going to be a couple of those programs that are really, really going to cause fits to some of the more traditional programs like those of Finland, Sweden, Canada, and the United States. Then, of course, there is the third player that has taken part in this tournament, and that is L.J. Mooney. He's got goose eggs on the board, but he's played 2 games. This graphic says 1, but he just finished his second game this evening in a 2-1 win by the USA over Switzerland. And the thing about Mooney is that he's not getting a lot of ice time. You know, he's a young kid. He's getting about 14 minutes a game. And he's not really been given big minutes as far as being able to create. Now, you know how important in these tournaments secondary scoring can be. So look for Mooney to be a little bit more of a game changer as the tournament progresses. But right now, not much as far as production from LJ Mooney. Another thing you need to mention about Team USA that involves the Canadians, and that is the brother of Lane Hudson, and that's Cole. From what we understand, what TSN's been reporting, he's doing okay, but he took a nasty puck to the back of the head, a slap shot from the blue line that hit him right below the plastic in the back of the helmet and knocked him down. And he was on the ice for quite a few minutes as doctors checked him out. He was placed in an ambulance and taken to hospital for precautionary reasons, but it looks like he's going to be okay. Whether or not he's concussed, that remains to be seen. We don't know how severely the puck actually contacted his head, but as a precaution, they made sure they took him to the hospital because, after all, it was the back of the head, and the tissue in the back of the head where the spine joins the skull can be is very tender. So hopefully Cole Hudson is going to be okay. Now, we've gone over the prospects and what they've done so far in the tournament. Of course, the second goaltender for Latvia, Vekvanags, has not played yet because Latvia only played their first game today versus Canada. And the other prospect, of course, Atos Koivu, has looked fantastic for Finland. He has a goal in the tournament. Didn't pull up the graphic for him, but Koivu is among the better players on the Finnish team. So look for him to put up more points as well. But he's looked extremely good so far with Finland. So his one-timer and his ability to shoot the puck, there's no question that he's able to rip the puck. I don't know whether or not Koivu is going to actually be a center with the Montreal Canadiens. That a little bit of a tall task, but he may very well end up on the wing because his ability to shoot the puck, especially from his off wing, is something that the Canadiens can absolutely use, especially on the power play with his one-timer, something that they could use to replace, say, a Patrick Laine a little bit further down the road. But again, as the tournament progresses, we'll see how Koivu contributes to the Finnish cause. And at the same time, we'll continue to look at guys like Hage, Mooney, and Handel to see how they fare in the tournament. Now it's time for us to look forward. We took the Christmas break off, gave you a little bit of a preview show for the World Juniors, and now the Canadiens are back in action tomorrow night versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. This was the trip last year that really turned the corner for the Montreal Canadiens and made them push towards the playoffs, because this whole 2-week period during the Christmas break, everybody expected the Canadiens, given how they had played previous to it, to really absolutely tank. So while everybody looks at the end of November and U.S. Thanksgiving as the cutoff date for whether or not a team's going to make or break the playoffs, this is the point for me that's going to be a turning point for Montreal. Whether or not they're going to be able to get through these 2 weeks relatively unscathed. Last year, they came back, I think it was with 8 out of 10 points, which was fantastic given their history over the Christmas break. And that all starts tomorrow versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. As we take a look at the lineups, right, Tampa Bay's playing tonight, and so we'll get to that in a minute. But as for the lineups, when we take a look at the lineups for the Montreal Canadiens and the Tampa Bay Lightning, they're as follows. You've got Caulfield, Suzuki, and Bolduc, obviously. Slavkovsky, Kapanen, and Demidov. Texier was skating. He's going to be a game-time decision tomorrow, along with Danault and Anderson, and Blais along with Veleno and Gallagher. On defense, the usual suspects, Matheson, Dobson, Hudson, Carrier, Struble, Xhekaj. And in goal, confirmed by the Montreal Canadiens and Marty St. Louis today, it will be Jacob Fowler. For the Tampa Bay Lightning, they got Goncalves, Point, and Kucherov on the first line, Gunsel, Sorelli, and Bjorkstrand on the second, Girgensons, Gourde, and Holmberg on the third, Douglas, Paul, and Sabrin on the fourth. On the back end, they're hurting. Moser and Radish, Datu and Crozier, Carlisle, and Santini. And in goal, they're playing tonight is Andrei Vasilevsky. So it's expected tomorrow that it's going to be Johansson in goal for the Lightning. We'll see whether or not that actually happens, because as I look at the score right now and the shot output in that hockey game, it's a final. Tampa winning it 4-2. Shots were 26-25 in favor of the Florida Panthers, but Kucherov sealed it with an empty netter. So Tampa comes away with a 4-2 win, and they'll face us tomorrow night. Now, here's the thing. Johansson will most likely play in that game, given the fact that Vasilevsky was taxed heavily by Florida, moving quite a bit laterally and really expending a lot of energy. So we'll see whether or not John Cooper's going to make a liar out of me, but I think Johansson's probably going to start tomorrow. I wouldn't want to see them actually burn out Vasilevsky. So as we look at tomorrow's game and all that fun stuff, let's take a look also at the injury bug for those teams. And Montreal, they've got a few scratches. Beck, Engstrom, and of course Montalvo, who just rejoined the team. Evans out 4 to 6 weeks, which is not a good thing for Montreal. He'll be sorely missed. Alex Newhook, Line and Gannon Larocque. On LTIR, you've got Doc and Gooley. As for Tampa Bay, McDonough is day-to-day with an injury. James and Finley are out. Hagel, Lilleberg out as well, and as is Victor Hedman and Cernak, who's on LTIR. Now, here's the thing. With both McDonough and Hedman out, you know that the Tampa Bay Lightning are hurting on the back end. And that's one of those things as we look at the keys to tomorrow's game, how Montreal is going to be able to beat Tampa is effectively part of that defense. But now it's time for us to look at our 5-point play, and those are the 5 points, strengths, weaknesses, key players on both sides, and of course the keys to victory for Montreal in tomorrow's hockey game. So let's take a look at Tampa Bay's 5 strengths. They've got elite top-end talent. We know this already when you look at Braden Point, when you look at Jake Gensel, Nikita Kucherov, who's among the best players in the National Hockey League. Tampa still boasts game-breaking stars, even though they've lost quite a few over the past few years. They can take over games in a shift at the blink of an eye. Their top players, which are Point, Kucherov, Gensel, Sorelli, they have extremely high hockey IQs, and they all have finishing ability. That also includes Yanni Gourde, who's on the third line, by the way. So that makes them an extremely dangerous team at any given time of a hockey game. You cannot take your foot off the pedal at any given time in this game. Another thing about Tampa, they continue to have an extremely dangerous power play. The power play remains one of their biggest weapons, so Montreal is going to have to remain disciplined. They've got really good puck movement, all of it keying off Kucherov on the right side. They've got multiple shooting threats, Point among them, Gensel as well. And they have excellent net front presence. They like to get people in front of the net and screen the goaltender. So the Canadiens are going to have to do a good job actually helping out Jacob Fowler at the front of the net and not traditionally front the opposition's forwards. They need to get in there and push them out of the way to give Fowler a fighting chance to see pucks and stop them. They've also, of course, got high-end goaltending. Whether it's Vasilevsky or it's Johansson, their goaltending is outstanding, and it's one of their strengths, and they rely on it heavily. So if you can get to the goaltenders early and often by putting traffic in front, you're going to get really, really good results. They always rally behind their goaltending, and their goalies are capable of stealing games. Whether it's Vasilevsky or Johansson on any given night, they can do that, especially when the team decides to tighten up defensively when they have a lead. Tampa's also got a lot of playoff experience. And so that experience breeds winning, especially when it comes to somebody like Coach John Cooper. He's, of course, the head coach for Team Canada in the Olympics this year. But Cooper's ability to coach and communicate with his players, he's well liked by everybody. It's one of the strengths of Tampa Bay, so you have to point it out, because without John Cooper behind the bench, I don't know whether or not the Tampa Bay Lightning would be as successful as they are right now. And the other thing that Tampa has is an extremely good transition game. It's super strong. The Lightning excel at moving the puck quickly through the middle of the ice from defense to offense. Clean breakouts, fast neutral zone play, and speed through the middle allows them to attack and generate odd-man situations at any given time. And they can catch the Montreal Canadiens defense off guard, so they need to be on their best behavior. Now we'll look at the weaknesses for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Of course, the team is getting a little long in the tooth. They're aging. Guys like Kucherov and Hedman and McDonough, Point, Gensel, they're not young anymore. So while Tampa's talent is elite, a lot of the core is on the wrong side of 30 now. So the team plays fast, forechecks aggressively, but Tampa has trouble with that same type of play. So if somebody like the Montreal gets in on the forecheck hard, especially given the fact that they're missing McDonough and Hedman, they'll really be able to exploit that part of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Their forward depth is really shallow. So if you take away Point, Kucherov, Gensel, and Sorelli, you'll have success. So the Montreal Canadiens need to take advantage of turnovers in this hockey game to be able to get on the right side of the ledger. That's not to say that Montreal can't generate their own offense, but if they want to take advantage of the Tampa Bay weakness at forward, they need to make sure that they take away the time and space of their top four forwards, and this way Montreal will have a distinct advantage. Their defensive zone coverage, there's a lot of breakdowns. And that is because, of course, they're missing some of their top-end guys. I keep mentioning Hedman and McDonough as two guys that they absolutely miss tremendously. They struggle with coverage, especially when they're pressured down low in their own zone. Cycling, net front traffic, and quick puck movement forces them to make mistakes and miss assignments. So much like what teams do against Montreal, Montreal can do that versus Tampa. Those same things. Move the puck around the zone. Don't take too much time to make decisions. Find open spaces and open ice and create offense that way by going east-west. They're going to be able to take advantage of Tampa along with a very strong forecheck. As I mentioned before, Tampa relies heavily on the goaltending of Vasilevsky or Johansson to have success, especially Vasilevsky. Now, given the fact that Vasilevsky probably not going to play versus Montreal tomorrow, that's a plus. But you need to take away the goaltender's eyes. You need to get net front traffic. There's one thing that both Vasilevsky and Johansson cannot handle is traffic in front of the net. So make sure you get sustained traffic in front of their goal, force the defenseman to try to move you to create secondary screens by getting in tight on the Montreal forwards that are at the net front, and you'll have success. It's going to be a really important game for guys like Slavkovsky, Brendan Gallagher, etc. And we'll bring up the 5 key Canadians in this hockey game a little bit later on in this segment. And finally, Tampa gets into a lot of penalty trouble. Given the fact that they're slow of foot, they end up being on the wrong side of the puck more often than not, and that forces them to take penalties. That's something that the Montreal Canadiens need to take advantage of because the Canadiens do have an extremely good power play as well. Here's the one thing, though, that you need to keep in mind when you play against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Regardless of whether or not their penalty killing is not as good as it should be, they are still dangerous in the counterattack on the penalty kill. They've scored a few shorthanded goals already this season, so you have to be mindful and take care of the puck even on the power play to make sure you don't give them any shorthanded opportunities. Now let's talk about the 5 key players for the Lightning in this hockey game. It starts with Nikita Kucherov. It always does. We in Montreal, after the 2021 Stanley Cup final and all the crap that came out of his mouth because he was a little too drunk to actually be at the podium, we hate him for it. You know, he's wondering why the Canadiens were celebrating. Well, nobody expected the Canadiens to be in the final in 2021. So for the Canadiens, that was enough of a celebration. They won Game 4. Everybody was happy. When the Canadiens lost Game 5 and he came out and turned around and said, well, why are they celebrating so much? They only won one game. It's like they won the Stanley Cup. Well, yeah. Being able to not be swept by the Tampa Bay Lightning and play extremely well in the playoffs was something that Montreal absolutely wanted to do, and they did. They went from being a team that wasn't expected to get out of the preliminary round to getting to the Stanley Cup final. So they had a lot to be proud of, Kucherov. So we don't like you very much here in Montreal, but you are among the best players in the league, and nobody can take that away from you. So Montreal is going to have to do a good job of forcing him to stay to the outside, not really giving him too much room to be able to create plays and feed his teammates, and at the same time, just make his life miserable. The second key guy I put in here because I wasn't sure whether or not he was going to play, but I'm kind of still edging towards Johansson, is Vasilevsky. Granted, he played tonight and faced 26 shots versus the Florida Panthers. It remains to be seen whether or not Cooper wants him to play, but Vasilevsky is going to be a key player. If it's not Vasilevsky, it's going to be Johansson. The Canadiens are going to get in his face. The Canadiens are going to pepper him with shots. The Canadiens are going to shoot from high danger areas like they've done all season long. And that's not something Tampa's actually used to. So if the Canadiens could get into those positions and shoot from those areas, Tampa's going to have to defend, and their goaltending is going to have to be top-notch one way or the other. Of course, Victor Hedman is out, so while he's an important part of their roster, it's too bad he can't play. It's always nice to see Hedman in the lineup. Braden Point is going to be another guy who's going to be extremely important for the Tampa Bay Lightning. If the Canadiens are going to take away Kucherov, Point is going to be a guy who's going to be really a focus for them. Point consistently produces goals at a very high rate, and he happens to be a notorious Hab killer. So, playing alongside Kucherov gives him a lot of scoring opportunities. So his ability to create high-scoring danger chances is something the Canadiens defenders have to be conscious of and take away from him as often as possible. And then, of course, there's Brandon Hagel, who's developed into a strong winger and provides good speed and physicality. His ability as a guy with secondary scoring is going to be key. So Hagel is going to be a very strong part of the Tampa Bay offense. Now, when you take a look at the Montreal Canadiens, it's the usual suspects with the exception of one player. Obviously, Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield, number 1 and 2 on this list, are going to have to be catalysts up front. They've been struggling playing alongside Zach Bolduc because they miss the play-driving abilities of Yuri Slafkovsky. But Slafkovsky is cemented on that second line right now, so the boys, Suzuki and Caulfield, need to step up. Now, of course, the Christmas break probably afforded them a little bit of rest that they needed because Suzuki and Caulfield looked like they were a little slower, I should say, than they normally are, especially Suzuki, who's been nursing a little bit of an issue with his leg. So those 3-4 days off really are going to do him well. Then there's Lane Hutson, who obviously needs to generate offense from the back end. That's not to say that guys like Noah Dobson and Mike Matheson don't need to do that as well, but Hudson's the most important key, especially when it comes to the Canadiens being on the power play. He's the general on the back end, much like Andrei Markov was. He distributes the puck, and he's the one that creates the offense with his shiftiness and ability to go from one side to the other very quickly. Another guy who's going to be extremely important in this hockey game, despite the fact that he's playing on the third line, is Brendan Gallagher. You're going to think I'm crazy, but Gallagher is on the second power play unit, and he's always in the face of the opposing goaltender. So along with Yuri Slafkovsky, Gallagher is going to have to play his old school, dirty, hard-nosed type of game to get under the skin of the Tampa Bay Lightning defense and really wreak havoc on whoever the goaltender might be. And of course, the Canadiens have to watch Jacob Fowler. The first 10 minutes of this game, Jacob Fowler has to mitigate what the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to bring. Now, of course, we'll get to a little bit more of this analysis pregame in a second as we get to the 5 keys to victory for Montreal. But Fowler is going to have to continue to play as strong as he has in the last couple of games. He's looked fantastic. He's looked poised, and he's looked really, really calm in net for Montreal. That needs to continue. Now, let's take a look at the 5 keys to victory for Montreal now. It starts with protecting Fowler, as I mentioned. Those first 10 minutes of the hockey game are going to be absolutely super important for the Montreal Canadiens. They need to make sure that Fowler has a clean slot and is able to see pucks to allow him to settle in. The Canadiens also need to simplify their defense. Don't overdo it. Stick to what works. You're man-to-man. It's been working. You're talking to each other. Make sure that your clears are easy. So cluster up when you're trying to clear the puck. Don't look for long stretch passes. Don't try to make high percentage plays, and especially don't try cross ice passes in your own zone because Tampa is notorious for picking them off. Don't make risky plays in your own zone. Make your exits clean, and you're going to have success versus Tampa. On the PK, limit the amount of cross ice passes you make. Okay? Take away the seam from Kucherov and point. It's extremely important. Kucherov always looks for it. When he can't find it, he'll normally turn and take a shot on goal. And the way Fowler has played, I could trust him, even if it's Kucherov, to make the first save when required. But the thing about Kucherov and Braden Point is that they try to exploit seam passes against every team that they face, including the Canadiens. Now, the Canadiens' penalty kill, it's not a world beater by any stretch, but it has gotten better over the past few games. Whether or not that continues, especially with the injection of Philip Deneau, remains to be seen. But Deneau does have a lot of experience versus Tampa. He knows what to expect versus Kucherov. So we'll see whether or not that translates to a little more success on the penalty kill. Another thing that's extremely important and key to victory for Montreal is to score first. The one thing you don't want Tampa to do is get a lead. Because the minute they get one, they go into a defensive shell and they make it difficult for Montreal to counterattack and create offense in the Tampa Bay zone. Start strong, Keep the game tight early and make sure you take advantage of any mistakes that Tampa makes and beat them in transition. Montreal's got more speed, exploit it. And finally, really important for Montreal, crash the net. As I mentioned, the goaltenders hate traffic in front and they hate second chance opportunities. So get shots on goal, drive the net, go hard for rebounds, and get those greasy goals that everybody says, they call them garbage goals. But one way or the other, when the puck goes behind the red line, it counts for something. So make sure that you do it and you do it consistently. Because if you don't drive the net against a team like Tampa Bay, you don't force them to make plays, you don't force them to take penalties, and it makes the game relatively easy for them. So again, your 5 keys to victory for Montreal, as you see them right here. I always point in the wrong direction when I do that. Protect Jacob Fowler early. Get him through the first 10 minutes. Make sure you keep his slot clean and you let him settle in. Simplify the defense by getting clean zone exits. Limit the amount of cross-ice passes on the penalty kill and close the seam off for Kucherov and point. Score first and get the Tampa Bay Lightning behind the 8 ball and crash the net hard looking for rebounds and second chance opportunities to score greasy goals. So there you have it. Your 5-point play. But there's another point that the Montreal Canadiens can exploit in this hockey game to take advantage of the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's not something that you normally see, but it's something that the Canadiens can definitely take advantage of. And that is the fact that Tampa played the Florida Panthers tonight. Both those teams don't like each other. And if you watch the game like I did, there was a lot of physical battles in that hockey game. A lot of fights. The penalty box was full at one point. And those, a lot of pushing and shoving and scrums after every whistle. And that takes a lot of energy out of players on both sides. And there were, at one point, I think there were about 5 or 6 Tampa Bay Lightning players in the penalty box at the same time. So take advantage of the fact that Tampa played a very difficult game. Take advantage of the fact that the Canadiens are going in there fresh. There's no excuse for not having energy versus a team that already played 24 hours earlier. Get in there, hard on the forecheck. Get gloves in their face. Stick them in the gut, like Reggie Dunlop used to say in the movie Slapshot. Get in there. Force them to make plays. And the more plays Tampa's forced to make, especially when they're tired and on the wrong side of the puck, the more success the Montreal Canadiens are going to have. It's that simple. Take advantage of that fatigue. Tampa may very well come out strong in those first 10 minutes, as I mentioned. You insulate Fowler, you take away their legs, and the game is yours. Simple. Let's see whether or not the Montreal Canadiens can execute. Now, after the Tampa game, the Canadiens play the Florida Panthers 48 hours later. We'll see whether or not Tampa has that same oomph that they did versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. And as I look at the schedule, hang on a second, for the Panthers over the next couple of games, let's see. The Panthers, they lost tonight 4-2. Tomorrow they don't play. Actually, okay, they play Montreal. Nope, sorry. They do play back-to-back. Oh, that's going to be fun for Montreal. Another opponent who plays back-to-back, because after Montreal plays Tampa, Florida actually plays the Washington Capitals before facing Montreal. So another instance where they're going to have a team that's a little bit more fatigued than they are. The Canadiens, of course, traveling, but it is a short little trip between Tampa and Sunrise. So I don't foresee that being an issue for the Canadiens. A short little plane ride, stretch your legs, get on the ice, have a good morning skate, and go. So it's going to be interesting how these two games lay out, but it's going to start with taking advantage of Tampa tomorrow night. What do you think? I know Hedman's not in, and I know my graphic had Hedman in there, and I apologize. I didn't realize he was injured before when I created the graphic. But overall, they're missing a couple of really big defensemen in Ryan McDonagh and Victor Hedman. Now, of course, up front, their top 6 is really good, but then after that, minus Yanni Gourde, they kind of fall off. And that bottom 6 is really more in a forechecking role than it is a scoring role. Gourde, of course, much like Brad Marchand, is a little bit of a pest, and he likes to get on everybody's nerves. The Canadiens, in turn, have Brendan Gallagher, who does the exact same job. And Gourde and Gallagher will most likely be facing off against each other, line versus line. So we'll see whether or not they get into each other's face. A couple of coincidental penalties happening here and there too along the way. A couple of face washes with the glove and whatnot. So we'll see. But you tell me, put it in the comments. What do you think is going to happen tomorrow night versus the Tampa Bay Lightning? Tampa, as I mentioned, in a tough battle tonight versus the Florida Panthers. They're going to be a little bit more tired than you would expect normally, but they are at home. So we'll see. Does that give the Canadiens a little bit more of an advantage? Or am I blowing smoke up your ass? You tell me. I think it's an advantage for Montreal. I think they're going to play well versus Tampa, and I think the Canadiens should come out with 2 points in Tampa tomorrow night, winning 4-2 with an empty net goal, much like Tampa did tonight versus the Florida Panthers. But you tell me, how do you foresee the game turning out? I know historically we don't play well versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. I get it. But this is a bit of a different team. After all, we're second in the Atlantic Division. We're not pushovers at this point. So let's see what happens. Go Habs, go. We'll see you tomorrow night after the hockey game.